Nick, I'm going to turn this over to you, sir. If you
Yeah,
guys
well, I
have
appreciate it.
any questions for Nick, I'll be sitting here for the next little bit, watching the Slack channel and asking questions as needed at the end of the talk. Thanks, everybody. Nick?
All right, excellent. Well, if you cannot see this PowerPoint, that's a problem, so I hope everybody can see it. My name is Nick Harris. I'm going to be talking about leveraging information leakage and misconfiguration.
I can't confirm that I can't see it, Nick.
Just a little bit about myself. I'm not Peter Weller. If you've been to the BSides website, there is a picture of Peter Weller on there. That is courtesy of Chris Wall, so I just wanted to clear up any confusion on that end. I'm a penetration tester and security consultant for Rural Sourcing Incorporated. Worked with the OWASP Top 10 and web standard methodology to kind of find vulnerabilities in major production web applications. So one thing I've noticed is that oftentimes it's kind of like the low-hanging fruit or oversight on part of the developers or whoever's deploying the application that often leads to a lot of our findings. So having said that, that's kind of why I picked this topic to go over. So yeah, just kind of a rough overview of misconfiguration. It can happen at any layer of the application stack, the platform, the web server, the application server, the database, and the web framework. Some of the popular web frameworks really suffer from these. I know like MongoDB has had over 28,000 breaches related to misconfiguration, oftentimes through the use of default passwords or their default resources. Piggybacking off of that, a large number of applications are usually shipped and deployed with unneeded and potentially unsafe features. Lots of times these are default settings or QA features or other things of the like, and this can lead to serious compromises in the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the application and its information. Those are kind of the primary components, the CIA triad of information security. So, when you have breaches in that, that's not good. So default installations that I was alluding to usually include default credentials, usernames, passwords, backdoor QA accounts that bypass normal authentication portals, insecure access mechanisms, whether it's just you can access file directly from the path or so on, incorrect authentication and authorization on files accessible through web servers, kind of the same topic. I mean, essentially it might be checking authentication on the front end, but not configured to actually check on the file path in the URL, and you could just directly navigate there. Misconfiguration, if you've got a very small surface, a couple servers and not that much going on, it'd be pretty easy to lock down. But oftentimes you have large sprawling applications and web presences and kind of the constant updated integration of new components and features, and that's kind of where this often comes into play. So this graphic is from the OWASP Top 10 Security Project. They've published a top 10 list of the major web application vulnerabilities every few years. And the latest one, security misconfiguration and sensitive data leakage is the technical term for kind of the information leakage on the OWASP top 10. They switched positions, but security misconfiguration still seems to be associated with like the vast amounts of major breaches, at least in recent years. But you can see here they have kind of a quantified category for these various components of why this is a problem, whether it's like the prevalence, the exploitability, the detectability, and the technical impact. So, the technical impacts are lesser here, but oftentimes misconfiguration can be leveraged into a much more devastating attack. So here's another graphic just kind of showing the percentage of the OWASP top 10 that were actually, that actually occurred. So security misconfiguration here is up top with 84%. Again, it's low-hanging fruit. Sometimes it's not the sexiest exploit. It's not like cross-site scripting or SQLi where you're, crafting an awesome payload to get into the DOM or something. But, it's much more prevalent than that, and oftentimes you can utilize the problems from A6 to launch into those more sophisticated attacks. Down here, sensitive data exposure is a little bit lower. It's still very impactful, and the reason why I decided to kind of combine these things is because, they they kind of played into each other. Like oftentimes misconfiguration does lead to a form of sensitive data exposure. Kind of on that overlap, here's another graphic showing how the A6 kind of encompasses all of the top 10. You know, again, usually misconfiguration is leveraged in some way to craft a much more devastating attack. And yeah, that's why, I mean, sometimes it's a chore to do, but it's doable. And, you know, I think it can go a long way into securing your web presence or whatever resources you're trying to protect. So just some of the common problems in misconfiguration, you know, mentioning again default accounts, whether it's like web servers, IoT devices. I know a lot of like camera or peripheral devices utilize default usernames and passwords, and if that's not like a core component of your network, then you know you might overlook it. I've heard stories of people getting into a you know, secure network through a multi-function printer device because it was using a default username and password. You know, I'm sure most people have heard of the major Equifax breach, which resulted in, you know, nearly half of Americans having major credit information, personal information leaked, and that was the result of the Equifax, you know, whoever was in charge of oversight using administrator and password as the username and password on, you know, a major forward-facing server. So, and that was it. You know, all the security mechanisms of the world don't do a damn thing if you're going to use administrator and password as the credentials, because it's working as it's intended. It's just not, you know, wasn't configured correctly. In addition to this, QA portals. I mean, oftentimes in pre-prod environments, there'll be some sort of, you know, extra functionality or resources provision to provide QA testing and feedback. And if these things aren't deactivated prior to launching that application into production, then that can lead to major problems. In addition, remote administration, whether it's actual control or just, you know, like being able to view logs or verbose error messages and debugging information, content management, kind of along with making sure all your assets on your application are secure, not just the front end portal, because if people can just, you know, bypass that directly and it's not actually checking the authentication on the resource, then that's a problem. Debugging in verbose errors is a big thing. You know, it's pretty easy to generate errors through either manual or automated fuzzing, and if you're getting very, very detailed information back from the application, that's often utilized to launch a more sophisticated attack. I mean, if you know exactly how the application is processing information, you know, or what's causing the issue and why it's being caused and where the issue is located, then you can really hone in on that and kind of chip away at any security mechanisms that might be in place. Obviously, security through obfuscation isn't really security, but if you're employing obfuscation in addition to actual security measures, it can go a long way. Default SSL certificates, outdated and weak cipher lists are also a problem. I mean, these things can be fairly complex to configure, especially in larger environments. So, you know, if somebody's unexperienced working with these, I mean, cipher lists in particular, I mean, I honestly wouldn't feel super confident about updating a cipher list for a major forward-facing application, but you know, it's no surprise that oftentimes, you know, you can have weak SSL and you know, lead to an issue because of that, whether it's sensitive data exposure or whatever else. Predictable resource locations and insecure indexing, kind of along the same lines of just check what input, you know, whether it's actually in a form in the application or going directly to the path in the URL. Just should be checking authentication on all your resources and not, you know, cutting corners. Kind of a fun little graphic here to demonstrate in more basic terms like what these concepts are. I mean, security misconfiguration, like it basically just setting yourself up to fail. I mean, this isn't a very sophisticated attack here, but it works because, you know, you've got a weak foundation. So, you know, if you've got strong stilts, then you can kick it all you want and it won't topple over. So that's kind of like why this is so important, in my opinion. Here's an example of a verbose error, kind of what I was talking about. I mean, you can see here you're getting very specific information back from the application as to what caused the problem. I mean, you have locations, you've got actual functions in there, so you could, you've got version information, so you can really take advantage of this to either, I mean, really, regardless of what you're trying to do, I mean, this information should not be returned, especially in a public-facing production environment. Here's an example of a non-verbose error. You can see that the web configuration file, was just configured to give this generic custom error, regardless of what, causes the error. People aren't going to be, cognizant of that, especially when you're using like large automated like fuzz lists or something to go through various inputs or, dash tools or whatever else. I mean, if you're getting detailed information for every single error, that, that's huge. So yeah, custom errors are important. So A3, a little bit about that. It's, you can see here a little bit lower on the exploitability and detectability, but the technical impact is higher, and the prevalence is considered just as high. So even though it doesn't have quite the numbers as A6, it's still very common. These are, kind of a graphic overview of sensitive data exposure. You can see what type of threat agents there might be, the attacker's approach. If you've got weak SSL and TLS, you can, have somebody hijack your connection, sit in the middle, man-in-the-middle attack. Not encrypting sensitive data. This is a big deal because even if you're requiring authentication on a database, if somebody can get SQLi on that database and dump its contents, well, if it's all encrypted, that's not a big deal. But if it's not, I mean, that's where you see these massive dumps of hundreds of billions of social security numbers, or where these giant rainbow tables of passwords come from, or so on and so forth. So I mean, if you're using a very, very strong encryption mechanism, it's going to require a lot of time and resources on behalf of the attacker to actually get anything. I mean, there's a saying that there's no such thing as perfect security, and I kind of believe that's true, especially when you look at some of the resources and patience that these APTs have, whether they're nation states or criminal organizations. But for the most part, unless you've got like, classified or some sort of highly valuable, highly sensitive information, those type of threats aren't going to be going after your stuff. So if you just do kind of simple things like secure configurations or encryption of the database, or, make sure you're using strong ciphers and proper key management, I mean, that can eliminate most of the people that, because they'll just go find something else that is more vulnerable. Like how to spot, I mean, with regards to security misconfiguration, I'll get into some more of the remediation kind of approaches in a couple of slides, but, developing automated processes or just kind of having baseline security checklists for all of your applications, I mean, just making sure there's proper oversight can go a really long way. The technical impact, obviously, just kind of touched on that. There's been many instances where, I think Target was a big breach with regards to credit card information. I mean, even LifeLock, I think their CEO he would put his social security number on his commercials, and I think he's had his identity stolen like 13 times. So, the Office of Personnel Management got a huge breach back in 2015, I believe. And as late as like 2019, they were still finding that people were having federal loans being taken out in their name. And a lot of the remediation efforts that the Inspector General suggested have still not been done. So, you really have to have a commitment from, the entire organization to do these things sometime, especially when it's large, I mean, you've got a lot going on and a lot of people involved, a lot of moving parts, and you can't really have downtime. But, a little bit of fix there can go a long way. Again, on the business impact, I mean, if you're trusted with securing people's, sensitive personal information, and all of a sudden you lose it, even if you've got some form of liability protection, from a legal perspective, I mean, the perception on your company is going to be I mean, I don't think many people have a positive opinion of Equifax anymore since since that major breach. I know I sure don't. So yeah, this is a graphic from White Hat, major web application security provider. They showed here that 82% of retail apps leak sensitive data, 67% of travel apps leak sensitive data, and 50% of financial and insurance apps leak sensitive data. With the nature of applications, especially in private for-profit institutions, I mean, kind of goes against a lot of security concepts. I mean, you want to be using the latest and greatest technology and integrate as much of the functionality as you can to try to increase your footprint towards the consumer, and you certainly want it to be available to the consumer, and that's why employing either arcane or arbitrary security controls or taking things down to run tests can be very unattractive. But I mean, as you can see here, there's quite a lot of this out in the wild, and seems like there's a new major breach you hear about every few weeks. So maybe at some point there'll be more emphasis put on that, but until then, you're going to keep seeing numbers like this. So yeah, just kind of a little bit more over what I've kind of previously covered. So personal information, whether it's an anonymous dumps that can be sold in the dark web or kind of other black market areas. I mean, you could either craft spear phishing attacks. I mean, if you get a database dump and have some, high income or high profile individual, you could potentially leverage information to craft fake emails. I know that former CIA director got his Gmail account hacked because he clicked a link, from the Google security team, which, I mean, that those people had to get his personal email address somehow and to be able to email him. If you can enumerate valid attacks, you can brute force those accounts. Just run automated attacks until you get the right password. So having a valid list of usernames can go a long way. In addition, the version information, things returned from misconfiguration, like in those verbose errors, can be used. If you have an idea of what server they're using, you might, check for the default resources that are shipped on that server, because most of these major products that are used in these applications are used by a lot of people, and the documentation is publicly available online. So if you know exactly what version and what technologies and software application or target is employing, it's way easier to actually do something on that. So, and same with this path and file information. If you can kind of get an idea of the directory layout or the directory structure, then you might be able to leverage some of these like secure direct object reference and some of these other mechanisms for bypassing authentication. Same thing with abusive and insecure protocols. If you don't have your application to force all sensitive data on SSL and TLS, I mean, you're vulnerable to, these man-in-the-middle attacks, or just, the information being leaked in general. This seems like a simple concept, especially when you have things like HTTPS everywhere. But again, when you have a very large presence using older components, it can be a little bit tricky. And that's, I think, why we still see this so much. Still on misconfiguration, again, weak cryptographic algorithms. If you're using something that was like, RC4 or something that was pretty good back in the day, but with modern computing standards can be cracked fairly easily, then that's not great. Same way, if you're using, weak key management or default certificates, you might be tricked into thinking that you have a secure connection, but you really don't. So here's some kind of more practical scenarios. I know I've touched on a little bit of this, but with regards to information leakage. So an application encrypts credit card numbers in a database using automatic database encryption, but it's not configured to, not decrypt that information automatically. So anytime you're making a query that's retrieving that information from the database, whether it's a valid query by an authorized user or, a query that was returned from something like a SQL injection, then it's just going to be decrypted automatically, which, it seems kind of ridiculous to encrypt things in the first place if it's just going to decrypt automatically anytime you view the data. So just configuration settings like that, could lead to a significant information leakage. Again, a site doesn't enforce TLS for all pages or supports a weak level of encryption. It would be pretty easy to monitor and capture network traffic, downgrade connections, intercept requests, and steal the user's session cookie, which, if you have somebody's session cookie, you essentially have access to their privileged account. I've seen multiple applications in the wild production e-commerce that use static session cookies. So, essentially as soon as you get somebody's session cookie that's static, then you can log in as that user anytime you want. And it doesn't matter if the user changes its password, because that session cookie, it doesn't change. So, you can see how like A3 and A6 can really kind of escalate depending on what vulnerabilities are actually present within the application. So, kind of on this, you can just replay these cookies and essentially make requests on behalf of that user. And if it's like a banking site, you can just initiate a money transfer as an authorized user right on the banking app, and, there's nothing they can do about it. They could change the contents of a message, like, somebody's user sending something to the administrator. They could change what the text was to, delete my account or change my email to this, or so on and so forth. So you can really see how in these type of scenarios can cause some major problems. So here's another example. This is huge. Obviously with Equifax or those rainbow tables, if you're storing your passwords in a database using weak hashing algorithms or not using salted hashing algorithms, then, whether it's a file upload flaw or however you're able to leverage that database dump, they can easily be cracked, and then you have a list of all those users' passwords. So I know that I can't remember how many, but it was, in the hundreds of millions, a very large word list out there that's like the most common user passwords. So, and again, with configuration, if you're not employing anti-automation countermeasures, which might kind of fall more into the DDoS category, but it does affect brute force, because if you've got a table of all the users' passwords and you've got a username list, even if you don't have the associated username and password, it's just a matter of time until you break those things. Even if you don't have the particular password, running a word list against a known hash table or within an application can be easily used to gain access. So yeah, kind of shifting to resolutions. This is kind of more of a high level approach. I'm not gonna pretend to be a developer or be able to like be an expert on the nuance of database development or super secure server deployment. Although I know some things about that, the point of this section is more to provide kind of like general recommendations and guidelines and resources. So developing repeatable processes for security hardening, that goes a long way. Basically it validates the configuration of your application, security mechanisms that are in place, just to make sure there weren't oversights. It's good to have kind of a baseline of what you're going for, and there are some external resources from the closest thing to standards bodies that kind of provide some guidance on that, whether it's OWASP or the NIST or ISO. And then you can have independent verification, because a lot of times if it's just, you're relying completely on automated tools, there's going to be oversights again. That's one thing. In manual vulnerability assessments, a lot of times you'll find things by just, trying to poke the application in a way it doesn't expect. And, if you just are sort of testing things by normal routine operation and it's all good, well then, there's still a lot of potential for oversight on that end. Securely configure servers to prevent unauthorized access to all resources. This one's pretty straightforward. Just always check authentication on all your resources. Don't just assume that because you're redirecting users to a portal to log in and not allowing people to access sensitive information via links or, kind of the proper flow in an application, that it's actually, when somebody requests a resource, regardless of how they request a resource, that you check that they properly authenticated. The SP800-123 is one of the NIST publication that's just a general guide to security hardening from a server deployment. It's an older document published in 07 or 08, but it does kind of provide a solid basis. I know other people in this conference have talked about kind of, more of the how-to on that, so I won't touch on the details, but that is a good reference point. Security headers are another small thing that can go a long way. Whether it's a content security policy header and X-frame options to put clickjacking or, unauthorized like origins and refers and things like that. I mean, having an X content type header so the browser is not, arbitrarily interpreting the data on the page, and including an HSTS header just to make sure that everything is actually being forced over SSL or HTTPS. Those are simple things, and just really the main thing is making sure that they're always present on all requests, because I mean, if you miss something, that's all it takes. Cookie flags are also something else. I mean, technically these really aren't security headers, but since it kind of seemed like a configuration thing, I decided to include this. I mean, using the secure flag will force the secure cookies over HTTPS. That's what we're talking about with regards to stealing the session cookies. That if you're not using the secure flag, if you've got somebody's connection, then you've got their cookie. The HTTP only flag is to prevent cookies from being accessed by JavaScript. So if you've got like an XSS flaw in your application and you're able to leverage that, you could potentially have a user, unknowingly send their session cookie to an attacker because they are able to, grab their cookies from XSS. Some more potential resolutions, kind of more on the lines of information leakage. When you're storing data by the application, you should classify that data, or I mean, really any data being used, you should classify that data, and you should apply security controls as per classification. So, if you don't have, if the data is highly restricted, then regardless of when that data is being called, it's going to be treated as highly restricted, as opposed to relying on other mechanisms to protect your sensitive data. You should actually employ those mechanisms on the data itself. You shouldn't store, unnecessary sensitive data. I mean, I know kind of the desire to keep a comprehensive, account of all the stuff that you potentially have, but what you don't have, you can't have stolen. So if you don't need it, then you should probably just lose it. Any data that's not being used, you should encrypt it. I mean, that doesn't really cause problems with speed. So, it's just a good practice. Constant up to date, make sure the algorithms are secure, because as time goes on, what was considered a stronger algorithm could be cracked by increased computing power. And if you're not updating your key management and algorithms on your environment, then I mean, obviously going to have a problem. So again, make sure that you're using secure protocols. Make sure that the directives are there to ensure that those secure protocols are actually used, and they're used everywhere. You should disable caching for sensitive responses. Oftentimes you can actually check authentication, that the session's logged out and terminated properly, but if you're not using that no cache, no store control header, then potentially just by pressing the back button, I mean, the browser doesn't really send a new request and there's no authentication checked, but since it allowed that data to be stored by the browser, then you can just just view it, especially on public computers or other areas. And if you've got a major application that's being used by hundreds or thousands of millions of users, then that will happen. And then again, storing passwords in databases using strong and adaptive hashing functions, just so that even if you get a database cracked and dumped, that that data by itself won't be useful. Somebody will have to put a lot of time and resources into actually getting something from that. So kind of getting near the end of the actual kind of slide and informational portion, just all of these things actually happen. I mean, that's kind of why I picked this topic to talk about. You know, it's great if you're able to get a really sophisticated SQLi on something, or, you know, like break an application via, you know, custom exploit, or get some awesome DOM XSS. But oftentimes that's, you know, time consuming, and if you really don't know how the application's processing queries or how it's set up, it makes it a lot harder. So just uh, you know, being able to get information about how the application functions, and, you know, what it's using, and, you know, what it has, what resources, and how it's processing things. I mean, just getting an idea of what's going on, that's kind of like the first step in any, whether it's a pen test or actual attack. I mean, you've got to enumerate the attack surface. And if things are misconfigured, then it's much, much easier to do that. So even if it's not some sort of critical thing that you can like directly access the web.ini or boot.ini, or, you know, some other secure file. I mean, if you can find version information and generate errors, and then, you know, through trial and error and enough persistence, you could probably eventually find something that would allow you to really to gain significant access to the systems, or compromise it in some other way. I know that, you know, again, like there, and this was from a few years ago, like over 28,000 instances of MongoDB being exploited by its default username or resource locations. Yeah, there's a big thing with Mexican voter registration. There's been, you know, just a laundry list of major instances that seems like, you know, the attack happened as a result of just declaring oversight. And, you know, again, if you're running an application that's got, you know, hundreds or, you know, thousands of servers and different resources, and it's been running for a decade, then it could be really hard to lose something in the weeds. But yeah, I mean, don't rely solely on automated tools. They do go a long way to help, but, you know, having some manual and independent oversight and validation of those findings is pretty important. These are just some references if people are at all interested. The OWASP Top 10 project is great. It's very, very good. You know, it kind of has like links and resources to remediation for each of the vulnerabilities. I mean, it's got great rundowns and descriptions. You know, there's the Open Web Application Security Project. You know, it's all free. So I would highly suggest anybody that's, you know, interested in this topic further to check those out. Some of these additional ones were just sources for the images and things of that nature. The Open OWASP does a web application verification standard. It provides a baseline and kind of all of the areas that you should really hone in on when you're wanting to secure a web application. So, you know, that's a really good place to start as a baseline for people trying to learn more about that. But yeah, so kind of, you know, concluding with the material I have, I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments or concerns, but I'd be kind of happy to open it up for that now. I'm not sure if
Thanks, Nick. We are actually trying to find that out right now. I added you to the Slack channel in track 1 there, Nick, so that you can.
Oh, cool. I'll check that out.
So far, I just want to talk about Nick's point a while ago about, you know, having access to some of the source code, some of the application information and stuff like that for noting where you can find these vulnerabilities and stuff like that. Sometimes it's super helpful for pen testers to have that information, because we have a very limited time frame that we can attack an application or infrastructure or whatever else. Whereas attackers, real attackers, bad guys, the criminals, don't have that time frame. You know, they can go as long as they want. And so it's much, I wouldn't say it's easier necessarily, but when you have unlimited time on something to a degree, it makes it a little bit more of a softer target, right, Nick?
Definitely. Well, and oftentimes when you're, you know, working for an organization, testing an application, you kind of have strict rules of engagement. So depending on how deep they want you to go, you know, they might just don't knock anything offline, or, you know, don't break anything. But yeah, to your point, the attackers don't have those constraints. So, I mean, that might lure you into a false sense of security.
Right. Skylar also pointed out
Yeah.
we're not bound by contract boundaries. That is absolutely correct.
Yeah, not bound by
exactly what Nick just said.
Production safe testing does not apply to hackers.
Right. Yeah, they don't care about. I mean, sometimes I'm sure some attackers care about DOSing something, taking something down because that might alert to their fact that they're there somewhere.
Yeah.
So they want to be super careful. It's very stealthy.
Yeah.
Often, real attackers are probably going to be more stealthy than what a pen tester is because, quite frankly, we're there for a limited time. We're there to try to find out what we can do. And quite frankly, if you're doing your job right as a blue team, for instance, then you'll know that we're there and you're going to try to shut us down in the first place to keep us from being able to do anything. And so I think there's a misconception around pen testing at times sometimes to say that, well, it's just a pen test that's happening. We want to see how far you can get. No, you want to make sure that your blue team and even purple team or whatever, if you have an internal red team, they're working hand in hand with us to make sure that we're all on the same page here, and they're trying to block all of our attacks because you need to treat this as a real live attack. This is not just target practice. This is, hey, we're being attacked and we need to figure out how to mitigate this as soon as possible.
I 100% agree with that. And, that's kind of where pen testing services or just vulnerability assessments can really come in and help out, the independent verification of whatever security configuration settings that the application or team might employ. So, yeah, actually having somebody try to break your stuff really goes a long way.
Well, Nick, thank you so much. If you guys have any questions for Nick, yeah, they have electric budgets. Yeah. I mean, I think that's probably referencing more like states.
Yeah, like
state
China.
Nation state actors and stuff like that, or possibly industrial espionage. It's not like you don't see some of that, but I think a lot of industrial espionage actually just kind of depends on more along the lines of just simply again, nation state actors and stuff.
Yeah. Well, whoever's blowing up Iranian weapon sites right now, those are that type of people. So.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, Nick, thank you so very much, guys. If you have any questions for Nick, feel free to ask him in the channel. We've got a few minutes left until we have. It looks like we got Critical Start going to come online and give an interview with. Looks like Ricky Allen is going to come online, and then Chris Wall is going to come on after that and talk about something. I don't know what, because quite frankly, I think he gave the talk on track 2. He's actually in the middle of track 2 talk right now.
I heard it was SQLnet.
Is that what it is? I have no idea.
Chris is the consummate expert in SQLnet.
He's a consummate expert in web app in general. Like if I have questions about what he used to work for True. Yeah. And if I have a question about web apps or something like that, I might ask him a question and be like, hey, I'm seeing something like this.
I see that when he gave a talk at the InfraGard conference, the Information Warfare Summit back in August, I believe, October, they mistitled his presentation because he was given on SQLi and they called it SQLnet. So I don't think there is a SQLnet, so it's kind of like a joke.
I thought that. I've never heard of that, but that's probably something he knows about that I've not heard of yet. That's pretty funny. I'll have to ask him about that later.
Yeah, you should. But well, thank you for everything as well. I appreciate everybody their time and consideration here.
Well, of course, we're glad you were able to join us, Nick. It's always a pleasure to have people come on here and talk about especially pen testing. That's what I do for True, and so I love hearing other people's perspectives on it, and because I always learn from everybody that I talk to.
Yeah,
it's just, if you're not constantly learning, you're literally going nowhere because it changes so often. So.
But I think that's what is so important about having a solid community, is because it does change so often, and there is so much that I don't think anybody could be an expert on one thing. But if you've got good resources, that goes a long way.
I absolutely 110% agree with this. All right, well, guys, like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to ask Nick. We've got about 10 minutes left. Yes, Ryan, this job really is about lifelong learning. You're absolutely right. Like I said, any other questions or anything like that, please shout them out in the Slack channel. BSidesOK -track 1 is where we're at. Until then, just a quick update on swag and lunch and everything. Let's go ahead and talk about swag. So we're updating this stuff at the top of the hour every hour, and I'll probably tell you this again about 1 o'clock whenever we bring on Chris for his talk. Let's go to Eventbrite to update your registration if you want the swag. We got like T-shirts and some stickers and stuff like that we're going to be giving out. That is limited to the U.S. based only. Unfortunately, I'm sorry if anybody is watching this on the interwebs in Europe or Asia or wherever else. Again, I think Nick, you spoke what sounded to me like flawless Russian a while ago.
Я говорю по-русски. Может быть, 4 лет назад я жил в России, и потом я знаю русский язык. So, yeah, I lived in Russia a little bit ago and studied in college. So, yeah.
That's
And
pretty cool, man.
then I went to work for the House Committee on Homeland Security. So Chris seems to think I'm a spy, but I assure you, I am not a spy.
How do we know? I would always say that they're not a spy. So
that's exactly true. How do you know?
Anyway, update your Eventbrite registration and add the swag ticket to get your free swag from BSidesOK this year. The T-shirt was designed actually by Chris Wall, who's going to be joining us next, and it's pretty slick. I gotta say, I'm very excited. It's basically the background you can see behind Nick there, and then of course on our BSidesOK.com website. Lunch, if you haven't grabbed lunch yet, please go install the Uber Eats mobile app. Once you install the mobile app, get signed into it and everything, go to tiny.si/BSOK. That's tiny.si/BSOK. And for those of you not in the know, that is from Secure Ideas, I do believe, and I'll have Sweeney probably correct me on that later if it's not. But I'm 99% sure that's from Secure Ideas, one of our sponsors, and one of the people that we actually, we absolutely love around here. Big thanks to them for helping us out with that. But lunch is getting a $15 coupon on Uber Eats, so up to $15 on B-Sides for whatever you want to get from Uber Eats. And really appreciate you all joining us today. Slack, if you're not in Slack right now, join the conversation. Get on slack.techlahoma.org. That is slack.techlahoma.org. And for those of you who don't know how to spell Techlahoma, it's tech and then the rest of Oklahoma.org. There's a CTF going on right now. Capture the Flag. That's Rook from Corbett Security's putting that on for us right now. If you join the BSidesOK-CTF channel, information for that is in there. You can join that CTF, get started on it. If you've never played on a CTF, I highly recommend it, especially if you want to do something like what Nick and I do, as far as from the perspective of attacking and having fun, just playing with stuff online. It's a lot of fun to do that. Rook's CTF is set up, and I actually started playing on it last night. And I believe that Carrie Joe, one of our coordinators here, was so kind to point out that I'm the humblest guy that they know around here, because I told them I was the first one to jump on the staff version of the CTF last night and score the first 100 points. So to be fair, it was a password cracking exercise, and I still had our Kraken server back up at the office. So, Nick, it looks like you're monitoring the channel, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I didn't feel like it was kind of, since it wasn't topic related, I don't want to interrupt you. So
hey, I'm just here filling time, so please talk to the people. We'd love to have you talk more. I'll let you know when I need to cut you off.
Oh, certainly. Well, yeah, I mean, it was required to be voluntary. So I guess I can consider it voluntary that I left Russia. But it was an interesting experience. It makes you appreciate Western plumbing. That's one thing. The pipes were built in the Soviet era, and Soviet era pipes aren't good. So
trying to find our next interview spot starts in 5 minutes. It should be Ricky Allen with Critical Start. And tell you what, everybody, we will be right back. Nick, if you want to continue answering any questions anybody has, feel free. If not, I can get us on to the next person.
All right. Well, if nobody has anything else, I really appreciate everybody, B-Sides and in the audience, and hope you guys have a great rest of the day and good weekend.
Nick, thank you so much.
Okay, cheers.
So the .// is a All right, everybody. As was said before, we should have Critical Start coming up here pretty soon to join us for an interview real quick, and we shall be right back. Welcome back, everybody, to Track 1 at BSides Oklahoma 2020. Appreciate you guys joining us today. On the line right now, we have Critical Start's Ricky Allen. He's going to be talking about Critical Start. Critical Start is one of the sponsors that we've had at BSidesOK for many, many years now. I've been putting their logos on the back of our t-shirts for quite a long time now. We really super duper appreciate them being here as a sponsor every year. And this year we wanted to give them a chance to talk and introduce themselves. Ricky is on the line right now. He's got a pretty cool background there. It looks like he's actually in the office right now, but I bet he's probably sitting at home, right, Ricky?
Bingo. The tricks of Zoom.
Well, fantastic. Well, Ricky, this is an opportunity for you guys to talk about Critical Start, about what you do for your customers, what you guys' product line and stuff like that looks like, and if we have any questions from the Slack, we can address those as well.
Excellent. Perfect. Thanks for your time then today. Many of you out there are customers of ours. We have been really in the greater Oklahoma area for over 8 years at this point in time. So definitely great to virtually see all you guys again, and can't wait till we can meet together in person one more time as well. Those of you not familiar with us though, we have really been in focus with that main point of anything we can do to resolve those alerts and stop your breaches. And so I really want to show how that can happen for you guys very, very quickly, and then get you back to your session real quick as well. So where we wanted to pick up once again, though, is who we are and what our goals are as well. You guys able to see our screen real fast? Just don't know if that was working or not for you guys.
Yes, it looks like we're able to see your screen just fine.
Okay. Perfect. So only just a couple slides to go through, but we're really looking at right now a mission of what we're trying to do for you guys. Really, number one, our principles, we want to do what's right for you, what's best for you, making those best decisions. Number two, we feel that good enough is not good enough. So we want to go beyond that, help you out further and further. And three, we want to take care of our employees along the way. Our mission was decided several years ago, though, was to find ways to protect your brand and reduce that business risk. Well, it sounds like everybody else here, but we're offering a variety of different ways. We are a product reseller. We are a managed detection response and services provider, and we also are that assessment services place for you. So we have not only assessment services, so we can help with GRC compliance, PCI testing, you name it right there. Very, very big focus in this area called Team Aries. So definitely just check out some blogs on our webpage. We just released a brand new platform for testing and management. So it don't have enough time to cover it today, but definitely please go look. We do have our own dedicated response and IR services, and then also those defensive services to help you along the way. But the one area you guys are most familiar with within Critical Start, though, is around our managed detection response. That industry-leading way of what we're doing to deliver for our customers is the secret here. We are now able to take 100% of all of your alerts, not filtering out, not ignoring, not only reacting just upon the critical ones, but we are looking at 100%. Our tool set called ZTAP is a Zero Trust Analytics platform, is able to reduce by over 99% of what you're dealing with. Now have a 0.1 investigated on our side, and then a 0.01% is the part that comes escalated back to you. So that being said, a 5,000 to 7,000 person organization is going to see now between 1 to 3 alerts a week versus the tens of thousands they may be seeing today. It doesn't mean we're ignoring, and it does mean that you actually are getting all of them, but we now have a resolution for each one. We know that this should always be either escalated or this one should always be allowed. We just don't have to go back and make those same decisions every day. How we also communicate back to you guys is through this cell phone type app for both Android and iOS. It is a time saver for sure. We are not in front of our computers all the time, but we do have our phones in our pocket. That point of escalation in a bi-directional application for you to either enter comments, actually run queries, and get more information from your endpoints and details like that is extremely beneficial. and has cut down for us to have a very industry-leading mean time to response of really right now about 18 minutes is what we're shooting at. So that is way better than the 110 days that the Ponemon Institute has come out with recently, along with Verizon's DBIR. But we definitely want you to come take a look at it. So as a next step, please come visit criticalstart.com. Come see the Critical Start difference, where we are able to bring down that dwell time by resolving every alert, being your in-house SOC, and dealing with our mobile SOC application on our phones, and definitely will help you guys with your security operations hands down. Appreciate your time. Next step, please go visit. We have some brand new ebooks we just released that walks through this entire piece for how to revolutionize your security operations. So with that, I'll let you guys get on to the rest of your day. Definitely appreciate your time and the chance to sponsor BSides.